And remember, with patience, you can do all things. This is my dojo. Welcome back to Kung Fu Pizza Party. I'm your host, Brandon Knight. Thanks for coming back. And this is our first full movie review, finally, for a show that is all about movie reviews. We're 4 episodes in doing our first movie review, and it took me a while to decide what was I going to do. Was I going to do something that everyone would be familiar with, like a 90s Jackie Chan, Rush Hour kind of movie, or would I do maybe one of the all-time greats, Enter the Dragon, Ip Man, one of those, iconic films? Should I do just like a silly comedic Kung Pao, Enter the Fist, just like something real silly to get us started? Or should I do a deep cut, Should I do something that like the insiders would definitely know and understand? And in the end, I decided to do something that I think kind of hits all of those marks. Today, we're going to be talking about The Master of the Flying Guillotine. This movie stars Jimmy Wang Yu as a one-armed boxer. This is actually the sequel. That's right, we're starting with the sequel. We're not starting with the first part. This is actually the sequel to the movie. The sequel to One-Armed Boxer, also starring Jimmy Wang Yu. For those of you who don't know, Jimmy Wang Yu made a career of playing one-armed boxers. And again, in case you don't know, this is not a boxer as we understand professional boxing now, but it was a term that was used for people who trained in Kung Fu. So he often played this character who only had one arm and was a master of Kung Fu. These films often that Jimmy Wang Yu were in is part of the wuxia style, which is kind of like a historical fiction, to use a very modern term. They're a historical fiction film. They take place in ancient China, and the main character in these kind of films, especially the ones with Jimmy Wang Yu, he's following almost like a samurai Bushido code. Now, samurai is Japanese, Bushido is Japanese, but he has this kind of like code of ethics that he follows. So he's a vigilante in a way, as in the sense of he has a moral code that he follows strictly, but not like in a Punisher Batman kind of way where, working outside of the law kind of thing. More of he is a regular man, a man who is well trained in the martial arts, in Kung Fu, and is going to go out there and do what is morally right. He is a righteous person. So, in this movie, it is like I said, the sequel to One-Armed Boxer. And honestly, if you've never seen the first one, sitting down, you'll figure it out. When you sit down to watch this one, it will take you all of 90 seconds to figure out what happened in the first one to get you to what's going on here. Because basically, Jimmy Wang Yu beat these two guys in the last movie, and now their master is coming to kill the one-armed boxer, and he's going to kill him by using the Flying Guillotine. Now, the Flying Guillotine is not the submission technique that some of you out there who do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu have tried to do, or maybe you've seen in the cage before in UFC or Bellator events. No. This Flying Guillotine in question, it's a picture a dog collar, okay, with a metallic dog collar with knives sticking at the end of it. Okay, all around there's knives, and then you've got a chain that is attached to it, and this assassin guy would whip his chain with this hoop thing on the end of it and throw it. It would then land on a person's head and form a basket over it. Knives would then jut out on the inside part, and he would pull the chain back, decapitating the person that was trapped in this basket-like device. That is the Flying Guillotine. And here's the real kicker in all of this. this master guy who's going to go after the one-armed boxer, Jimmy Wang Yu, he is blind. So you have a blind assassin going after a one-armed boxer. And because he's blind, throughout the beginning portions of the movie, anytime he comes across somebody who has one arm and does kung fu, he just goes ahead and decapitates them. So we get like 2 or 3 decapitations before we actually get to the part where he runs into Jimmy Wang Yu and they have their big showdown. The version of the movie that I watched, I found it for free on Tubi. For those of you who want to go check it out, it's definitely one now that I have to find for my own martial art movie collection that I've slowly am putting together. There's a lot of great sound effects in this. For those of you who haven't seen these like 70s era kung fu flicks, a lot of great dubbed in sound effects. This is one of those where, and I know I'm going to see this a lot as I do more of these reviews. It's a lot of the sounds when they're all fighting. Every time that the blind assassin throws the flying guillotine, it makes that sound like in westerns when a bullet ricochets off of something. Also, can you hear producer Cooper in the background redoing the sound effects as I am recording this? Yeah, so it's full of great sound effects all the way through. How this movie works, though, plot-wise, is that while this assassin guy is looking for the one-armed boxer, the one-armed boxer has been invited to view one of those things that every martial art movie, every martial artist loves to watch. Every martial art movie has it at some point, it seems like. Here's a competition where people of varying styles are all going to fight each other. We love this. We are simps for this. We want more of it all of the time. In last week's episode, Joe Day talked about kind of the tiered fighting system and like a lot of the old arcade systems, or like in The Quest or Game of Death. You know, this is like this one was more of a tournament style, and you'd had a lot of these just like different kinds of styles going up against each other. You know, at one point, I'm trying to remember now. At one point, it was like I think it was a bow staff versus a 3-pronged staff in a fight. There were 2 guys fighting each other, walking on pegs while there were swords sticking up out of the ground. And obviously, you know, the first guy to fall off the pegs clearly loses. So he just, you know, one of the fights was, there was like a guy who was kind of like a pro wrestler, had like this pro wrestling style. Another person had kind of this like Muay Thai fighting style. It was you get all these, and all these matches are like 90 seconds, 2 minutes long. Just that way you keep the flow of the movie going. Although there were also so many of these matches that I think the bulk of this movie is this tournament scene that the one-armed boxer is observing. And in time, this is where eventually the blind assassin finds Jimmy Wang Yu, a couple of the guys in the tournament side with him, and they're going to work with him to try and like capture the one-armed boxer. And this inevitably leads to the big showdown where he takes on these 3 guys, and then eventually the one-armed boxer versus the blind assassin with the flying guillotine. So this part of like how the one-armed boxer gets ready to then go on and take on all these different guys leading up to the big boss fight is actually something that I really, really like about this movie, that I find to be very different from a lot of other kung fu movies from this era that I've seen. Because a lot of times when you get to this part of the film where it's going to be the good guy versus, you know, the horde of bad guys leading up to the big boss fight, The good guy, he'll go into super training mode, right? Get super buff, work on one very specific technique in order to have like one perfect blow during the match, or maybe he'll learn some type of like secret skill, secret talent, some hidden form, so that way he can attack the big boss with some style, some technique that the big boss guy has never seen before. What was different here, and I really liked this, is that in preparation for the big showdown, the one-armed boxer doesn't do any of that, which is common in these movies to see one of those things I just described. But instead, he goes off and he observes somebody cutting down bamboo. And like the love interest woman of the film is kind of sitting there with him, and he's watching this guy cut down bamboo, and he's reflecting. And he's reflecting, and he's observing, and he makes a game plan from here on how he is then going to use the skills that he already has in order to ultimately defeat the henchman and defeat the master of the Flying Guillotine. And the reason why I like that so much is because part of that seems very realistic, of like sometimes when you go into a battle, whether it's warfare or one-on-one combat or, just kind of getting through life in general, there are times where you do have to retreat. Sometimes we think of retreating as a bad thing, but retreating isn't necessarily a bad thing in every circumstance. Sometimes we have to pull back and just regroup and refresh ourselves and think about our situation at a different angle and a different approach. How are we going to do this? And it actually harkens back to that line that I opened the episode with. Because at the very beginning, when we're first introduced to the one-armed boxer in this film, back at the very beginning, he's teaching his students. He's an instructor. He's teaching his students how to, what my English dubbed was calling jump. Jumping involves being able to walk on rims of baskets, and he literally also walks up a wall and across the ceiling. I don't know how any of that is jumping, guys who translated this movie, but whatever. So he's doing like basically these impossible things, and before he dismisses the class for the day, he says, and remember, with patience, all things are possible. And you see that visually demonstrated here in this scene while he is observing this guy cutting down bamboo, of like, he is just patiently observing, reflecting. He's not freaking out, anything like that. He is regrouping. And I love that. I think it's very realistic. I think that's something that, like, in modern culture, like I said, retreating is sometimes seen as this like really bad thing, like it's an admission of defeat, or that to be patient and still is kind of like this, come on, we have to be like active all the time and always doing something. No, there's a place for being still. There's a place for, finding your strength, becoming renewed in the waiting, in the patience. And then he goes on and he battles these different guys, these different henchmen, and ultimately gets the battle with the big boss. And I really like how he goes about defeating everybody. Because again, it's not like he knows some secret technique or got super buff in order to do it. He literally just outsmarts everybody. The one guy who's like a Muay Thai fighter, he fights him at one point in these various showdowns. And this was maybe my favorite fight because, again, it was just so creative. This Muay Thai fighter fought barefoot, which I get. I'm a barefoot fighter as well. I mean, a lot of us probably fight barefoot. But, in this, it's like everyone's wearing shoes because they're fighting like in the street. Still, he's like barefoot in all of this. So the one-armed boxer lures this guy into this like old, it kind of looks like almost like a shed with like a metal floor in it. And the one-armed boxer's students light this shed on fire, and the one-armed boxer and the Muay Thai guy are fighting the whole time, but as the house continue, or as this like shed thing starts to continue to warm up, the Muay Thai fighter can't walk. He can't like stand on the ground. He's like burning his feet. He ends up like holding on to something, and ultimately the one-armed boxer is able to defeat him. And there is this nasty shot at the end of the fight where you just see this guy's like burned, blistered soles of his feet. It's nasty. But again, it's like very creative. I've never seen, that's something that Jackie Chan was always hailed for in the 90s, using ladders and jackets, and even prior to that, when he was doing Drunken Master style and all these like untraditional kung fu styles. It's just refreshing sometimes to see a fight being won in an unorthodox way. And it's similar again with when he has the showdown with the blind assassin with the flying guillotine. This guy is like, he's the one-armed boxer sets up like bamboo stalks, and he takes him through this area, so that way every time he throws the flying guillotine, he's catching the bamboo stalks rather than the one-armed boxer's head. At one point, he takes him into like this area where there's a bunch of birds. It's like this room with a bunch of birds, and so the blind assassin guy isn't able to like figure out where the one-armed assassin or one-armed boxer is because he's disoriented with all his other senses. And I think eventually they go into, it was like a shop where they make coffins or something like that. And he's got it, the one-armed boxer has it booby-trapped. So there's like knives and axes in different spots as they're fighting. And the assassin guy is kind of like falling on these different sharp objects until eventually the one-armed boxer overcomes. He wins. He wins in the end. So yeah, that is the Master of the Flying Guillotine. And I don't know, I'm going to be honest, folks. I never really considered doing a rating system because the whole rating system thing for me is just it's a little arbitrary. I don't even know what this movie comes up as for Rotten Tomatoes, if I'm being honest. But like I said, this is definitely a keeper for me. This is a rewatch for sure. I'm trying to build more of a physical media martial art movie library along with a book library as well. And so this is definitely one that I would go out and try to find like a copy. If I came across a copy, I definitely would pick this one up. Again, I found it on Tubi. I'm sure people who are experts on the whole dubbed versus subbed argument can tell me how there's a very specific subbed version that maybe doesn't translate things as jumping when it's clearly walking on walls. And just to be clear, I don't think you can necessarily walk on walls. I have never been taught how to do such a thing. I've never been that patient in life. But I do think that there is something, again, to this idea of, we can do so much more if we're just willing to be patient and reflective and think through the issue versus maybe just always leaping into action. Just keep that in mind. Keep that in mind, because here on Kung Fu Pizza Party, we're not only delivering high-flying action in 30 minutes or less, we're serving up some wisdom one slice at a time. And speaking of 30 minutes or less, it looks like you're getting this episode way ahead of schedule. We're not even at that 20-minute mark yet. That's awesome. Well, hey, we got our first movie review in the books. Also, drop in the comments and let me know what movies do you want to hear. You can always, over on our Instagram page, at Kung Fu Pizza Party, follow us if you haven't yet already. And please, let me know, what other movies would you like to hear here on the show? We should probably go back and do One-Armed Boxer at some point. And also let me know, I'll post this later on in the week after this episode comes out. What weapon do you want in a fight? Would you want to use the flying guillotine? I got a couple other options. I'm thinking of that flute that Tommy used in Power Rangers. That was a Dragon Blade. Is that what that thing was called? Or maybe Lucille, Negan's baseball bat covered in barbed wire and nails, which, also was a common thing in ECW, and the Monster Abyss also used that thing as well. But Let me know what are some movies you're also interested in hearing reviews of here on the show, or what is your weapon of choice if you were to go into battle? I gotta say the Flying Guillotine itself, I think it would be a challenge to use for sure. That seems like that would be really heavy, that thing you're whipping around on this like very thin looking chain, but obviously devastating results. But thanks for listening to today's episode. If you haven't yet already, please rate and review the show wherever you get your podcasts. I already mentioned the Instagram page. And please pass this episode along to a friend that you think would enjoy learning about the Flying Guillotine and the magic that is Jimmy Wang Yu. By the way, fun fact about Jimmy Wang Yu, just to kind of like help cement who this guy is in some people's minds. This was the guy. He was the guy before Bruce Lee. He was the highest paid actor in this category before Bruce Lee. So I'm sure for some people out there, this is like a no-brainer thing. But for others, it looks like so far we have a lot of new people to this genre who's checking the show out. This was the guy before Bruce Lee came on the scene. And obviously, there has not been a Bruce Lee since then, and really, I don't think we've really had a Jimmy Wang Yu since him either. I don't think we've really had a lot of guys going around doing the one-armed fighting style, but who knows? Maybe I'll find someone else here as I do more reviews. But until next time, this is Brandon signing off. Thanks for listening. This has been Kung Fu Pizza Party, where we're delivering high-flying action in 30 minutes or less and serving up wisdom one slice at a time.